independent at the last election. Ryan, Jason, welcome to the program.
Hi, PK.
Thanks, PK.
Let's start with campaign costings. It is increasingly kind of like a bit of a pantomime in election campaigns. Labor's got theirs out, the Coalition gets theirs out tomorrow. Ryan, to you, are voters concentrating on this, given really both campaigns have been quite high spending?
Oh, I think they are, and I think it does go to sort of credibility when it comes to economic management. The idea that, you know, you have your costings out before the other party. It's a small little win in that respect for the Labor Party. Being able to put the pressure on Angus Taylor and Jane Hume to sort of stand up and show how they're going to pay for things, given the line around the $600 billion that has to be cut from the budget to pay for the government. So the Coalition's nuclear power plant plan has been so pertinent. So it has put the pressure on the Coalition, and there is a drumbeat sort of heading into the final days. And if, you know, one of those last final days ahead of the election on Saturday, ahead of polling day, can be characterised by, you know, a costings potential bungle from the Coalition, and that's obviously a positive for the government.
Well, Jason, tomorrow is the day that the Coalition will finally outline their costings. They claim the budget bottom line will be better under them, but they, you know, you'd have to agree that the Coalition hasn't exactly been small in its spending in this election, and they've matched so much of Labor's spending to start with.
PK, well, of course, you've hit your target perfectly. I always think governments are spending too much money, but that's just me. Yeah, look, I think this has been a high-spending election campaign. I think it's reflective of the fact that a lot of Australians are feeling cost of living pressures, and really governments all around the world are a bit stumped about what to do about that, so they're relying increasingly on direct subsidies. And Angus Taylor and Peter Dutton have also adopted that strategy, which means no one comes to the costings exercise without, you know, with great purity, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Purity is certainly not the centrepiece of this campaign, I think it's fair to say. Today, the Prime Minister addressed the National Press Club. You know, he made his point that the opposition leader hadn't addressed it, which is also a way that he tries to, you know, demonstrate that he's the one that's prepared to be more accountable, Ryan. Is that message, though, does it matter to people? Is it landing?
Oh, I think it's important because it really has shown up Peter Dutton this campaign, the idea that he hasn't exposed himself to those sorts of environments, you know, the regular sort of press conferences in Canberra with the press gallery where you're under sustained repeated questioning, the press club where you stand up and you cop some of the nasty questions from the journos sitting at that front table. So it does make you match fit, as we've seen with the Prime Minister this campaign. And you've certainly seen it lacking with Peter Dutton. And I guess it means that the lack of scrutiny means that policies have been coming out from the Coalition that have been half-baked, that haven't been gone through the rigour that you'd hope with election policies, like full PBO costings through the Parliamentary Budget Office, full research, things like, you know, the work-from-home policy. You know, Blind Freddie could see that coming from a mile away, that was going to blow up in the Coalition faces, and the feedback that, you know, the leadership was getting from backbench MPs was that it was going to blow up, but still they sort of persevered. So that lack of scrutiny and that lack of accountability has really let the Coalition down this campaign, I think.
The opposition leader, Jason, didn't address the National Press Club. Do you think that's a mistake?
Look, it all depends really, PK, on where he's at, what the priorities are, frankly what the research of both party or the Liberal Party is showing. And look, let's face it, addressing the National Press Club, while it is full of wonderful and generous people, and I reject Ryan's ideas, that view that they ask nasty questions. That's completely unfair, Ryan. But the fact is that it is still a bit of an insider's game, and maybe at this point he's calculated with a week to go, he's better off looking like he's out there in the community, mixing it with voters and taking people's questions that way. And so tonight he's on another network with a People's Forum. So there'll be that contrasting style, I suspect. Look, we'll find out on Saturday night whether it worked or not. But that, I think, is probably the tactical calculations that both campaigns are making.
Now, the other issue that's come up throughout the week is essentially Indigenous affairs, and I'm sure lots of Indigenous people have thought this is rather odd. If I can, reflect some of the Indigenous people I've spoken to who've said to me, kind of our issues have been ignored, but then they've come up in ways that I think many of them find unwelcome. Today, the opposition leader repeatedly brought up the Voice again, trying to say that Penny Wong had suggested that it was inevitable that it would be brought back. Now, this is because Penny Wong spoke in a podcast and made a comparison with marriage equality. Ryan, the Prime Minister was pressed on that as well. I mean, it clearly was a little unfortunate for Labor, wasn't it? Because clearly the Voice was a winner for Peter Dutton, and he's now been able to say this is Labor's plan to bring it back.
I think it's been a little bit strange this week, PK. You talk about, obviously Indigenous issues coming to the fore in the campaign at the strong behest of Peter Dutton. Obviously, the Anzac Day commemorations were interrupted on Friday. Peter Dutton, by some people sort of heckling and yelling. Peter Dutton said that was disrespectful on Friday. Then on Monday, he said, that he didn't think the Welcome to Country ceremonies were appropriate. Now, the idea that he wants to talk about Welcome to Country ceremonies this week, he's talked about, the ABC as the hate media, the Guardian as the hate media, talking about issues that really aren't sort of front and centre for people who are making their mind up heading into the ballot box, this week and on Saturday. I found that really bewildering. I was talking to a candidate, one of our candidates in South Australia this week, and I asked her about the Welcome to Country stuff, and I said, how often does it come up? You've done a lot of direct voter contact, and she said to me, not once. Literally not one person has ever raised that with her in the year or so she's been campaigning for the seat. So I think that it really sort of goes to the fact that their campaign's not going particularly well. They're reverting to the base. Jason talked about various media that the opposition leader's been doing. He's done Sky After Dark twice this week. People that watch Sky After Dark probably don't necessarily need convincing to vote for coalition a lot of the time. I know it's a generalisation, but...
Well, maybe they do. Maybe that's the point. Maybe they do.
Look, at the start of the week, you and I were reading stories in the paper about this huge blitz the opposition leader was going to do through seats across the country, Mr Action Man, win votes left, right and centre. I haven't seen any of that. Sitting in the studio at Sky After Dark isn't out there sort of pressing the flesh with MPs, with candidates, trying to win those local votes. So I think we are sort of seeing a bit of a live stream of a campaign in disintegration, and I think on Saturday we'll see the results of that.
Yeah, Jason, I do wonder how some of these things play out in a seat like your former seat and other seats that have now been won by independents. There are some culture war kind of elements to some of these discussions. They certainly aren't cost of living issues. Do you think it could be damaging for the coalition in those parts of Australia?
PK, look, after the election, you and I should sit down for half an hour and I'll give you my views on...
I cannot wait.
Where I think...
Is that the deal? Let's make it a deal.
That's a deal, absolutely. I think that the Liberal Party wins when it is talking about a larger society and a larger community, not sort of niche wedge issues, which I think Ryan was pointing to there. To be fair to Peter Dutton and to be fair to the Liberal Party campaign, it didn't raise Welcome to Country ceremonies. It didn't raise the Voice. That was pretty sloppy by Penny, and frankly, she knows she would be kicking herself for opening that door. But if there's anything that really annoys me in Australian politics, it's the politicisation of Indigenous affairs. I really think that this is one group of Australians who desperately need our attention, and we all need to leave our ideologies at the door and talk about practical solutions that are actually going to result in closing the gap. So it is incredibly unfortunate when these things get brought up in the middle of campaigns. In terms of has this been a good campaign for the Liberal Party or not, I think it's been a very difficult campaign, and that's been outside the control of the Liberal Party. And we just saw in Canada overnight that a leader, being Pierre Poilievre, who was leading at the end of February by 29 points, has ended up losing, and we all know the factors that largely drove that. And I think, while not as pronounced in Australia, there has been a part of that here in Australia as well, and maybe we could have been more agile. It's difficult to know what we could do really to counteract that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty honest answer, given we're only a couple of days away from the election, Jason. Given, you know, your party affiliation, I appreciate you being honest, because I think people want straight talk about what's going on, and I think you're right about the Canadian. There are parallels with our politics. It's not entirely the same. We do not share a border. In fact, we quite like not sharing a border with anyone, don't we? Let's be honest. It's something most Australians will be nodding at for sure right now, going, yeah, it's pretty good. You know, nice oceans. Okay, so we've got a couple of days left. Ryan, I know you don't like the 2019 Labor loss trauma, but I have to take you there. Keep hearing it from Peter Dutton. I've heard it from the Prime Minister. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. This might be a bit like 2019. My inbox, that I hope I don't ever lose my phone, is full of both Liberal and Labor people saying to me, oh, I don't know, might have 2019 feeling. What do you think, Ryan?
That's a very open-ended question. I think both leaders should be, if they're worth their salt, running 100 miles an hour up until 6 o'clock on Saturday, May the 3rd. And I certainly know it's what the Prime Minister's prerogative is, and it's as per what I was saying previously, it's kind of a bit bewildering that the opposition leader hasn't been doing the same thing. I think the key is showing that, you know, that you're not not going to give up. You're right to the end, all the way through. If I was the opposition leader, I think they missed a trick insofar as obviously there's international factors that influence, to Jason's point, but they really missed that trick before the campaign, which was really transitioning from that opposition to alternative government. Like, you've got the opportunity to do that just before the campaign. They failed to do that. They didn't do the work on the policies. And now they've been outdone on policy, they've been outdone on politics, and they've been outdone on the campaign. And I think, the results are coming through in the polling that we're seeing, coming through during the week.
Jason, final word for you about that kind of dynamic, about what's at stake, and whether there might be a sort of suburban strategy that Peter Dutton was eyeing and it may be working?
Look, I think there's evidence to that. Look, every election's different, and this isn't like 2019. But there would be some data points that I think Labor campaigners would be worried about. One is that there's no real love for this government. It's not a government that most Australians think deserve a second term. They might choose it because of other factors, like they're looking for safety and certainty given what's happened since February. However, you know, they might get to the polling booths on Saturday and essentially say, you know what, I can't see any difference between them. I don't think my life's any better off than it was 3 years ago. I don't see any cost in changing. So there is a lot of volatility in the electorate at the moment, and there are stories coming out left, right and centre. We don't know how they're resonating, what stories people are choosing to listen to, what stories they're ignoring, and what stories will land. And all of that is just making for a very, very volatile election. At the moment, you would put money on Labor, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Liberal Party does better than most people are expecting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Well, it's been great to pick your brains. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you.